The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a planetary surface that could only be described as hell itself. A roiling sea of molten rock stretched to the horizon, rivers of lava carving through jagged obsidian landscapes, geysers of superheated gas venting from the cracked crust like steam escaping from a dying world. The temperature readings made several students in the lecture hall recoil in horror. Surface temperature, 1,200 degrees Celsius. Atmosphere composition, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, trace metal vapors. Gravity, 1.7 g. Survivability index, 0%. Dr. Verloc, a towering Falnari scholar with deep blue, chitinous skin adapted for sub-zero environments, turned to face his students. His voice, filtered through a translator, carried the cold amusement of an educator setting up a challenge he knew none of them could solve. "Welcome to Gliese 72D, he announced, his multifaceted eyes glinting. "A planet so inhospitable that not a single biological organism has ever been recorded surviving on its surface. Your task? Develop a theoretical survival strategy for a sentient species to exist here for at least 1 hour without external power sources or teleportation." A murmur of dismay rippled through the class. This was the Galactic Academy of Xenoscience, the most prestigious institution for interspecies education in the known galaxy. The students hailed from dozens of worlds, each species boasting unique evolutionary advantages. And yet, as the data fed into their holodisplays, even the brightest among them could see the problem. It wasn't just difficult. It was impossible. A six-limbed Ralquan student raised a trembling appendage. "Professor, with all due respect, there is no theoretical method for survival here. The atmospheric composition alone is." Dr. Verloc nodded. "Lethal to carbon-based life, yes. The temperatures? Capable of reducing most metals to slag. The gravity? A death sentence for any species unadapted to high-G environments." He folded his arms, his expression unreadable. "That is precisely why this is your final challenge. It is not enough to understand what is survivable. True xenoscientists must comprehend the limits of existence itself." The students exchanged uneasy glances. Every species had their evolutionary strengths. The cold-dwelling Lutheri could endure temperatures just above absolute zero. The aquatic Zolthorians could survive under crushing pressure at the bottom of methane oceans. But this was pure death. 1 week, Verloc concluded. Submit your strategies before the deadline, and remember, creativity is encouraged. The assignment was supposed to demoralize them, to reinforce the immutable laws of physics and biology. And it would have worked. If not for the one human in the room. How bad is the gravity? The casual question sliced through the tension like a plasma knife. Heads turned toward Jack Carter, the only representative of Earth in the entire academy. He was leaning back in his seat, boots resting on the desk, eyes lazily scanning the planetary data like he was browsing a menu. Dr. Verloc narrowed his gaze. "Irrelevant. The heat alone would incinerate you." Jack shrugged. "Sure, but how bad is it? 1.7 G? That's, like walking around with an extra 50% of my body weight." He cracked his knuckles. "I've done worse." The silence in the room was palpable. Some students glanced at their holodisplays, recalculating the gravity's effect on their own fragile frames. For species accustomed to light gravity, even 1.2 G was crippling. 1.7 G? A death sentence. Jack, however, looked completely unfazed. Dr. Verloc sighed. "Human, I assure you, it is not the gravity that will kill you." Yeah, Jack waved dismissively. "The heat, the gas, the pressure, whatever." He leaned forward, smirking. "You said the challenge is to find a way to survive there for an hour, right?" "Correct." Jack grinned. "All right. I'll just go there myself." The lecture hall erupted. "You what?" "That is suicide. He's lost his mind." Dr. Verloc's mandibles clicked in irritation. "I sincerely hope you are jesting, Mr. Carter." Jack just stretched, standing up and cracking his neck. Not really. We've got heat-resistant suits, right? I'll just suit up and walk across the surface. Maybe take some readings. Should be fun. A cold hush fell over the class. Even the professor, for all his knowledge and composure, was momentarily at a loss for words. Then, slowly, he chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Very well, Mr. Carter. I will humor you. If you can submit a functional, scientifically sound survival plan that allows you to last an hour on Gliese 72D, I will personally sign off on your field test. Jack winked. Deal. The other students were still reeling when Jack casually grabbed his datapad and walked off, whistling. One Ralquan muttered in disbelief, "What kind of monster is he?" Dr. Verloc exhaled slowly, watching the human leave. That is precisely what I intend to find out. It was an hour before the first student spoke to Jack. A single message blinked on his hollow interface as he sat back in his dorm room, sipping coffee and scrolling through the latest planetary research. Are you sure about this? It was from Mira Quavri, a Erythian from the ice world of Zither 7. He had known her for years, quiet, calculating, a genius when it came to engineering, but right now, her words had an edge of genuine concern. Jack paused, then tapped a response. What, the lava planet? Of course. I've been through worse. She replied almost instantly. Worse than lava? Are you out of your mind? He grinned at the screen. Maybe. But I'm still going. The next morning, Jack stood in the simulation hall, staring at the holographic projection of Gliese 72D once more. The simulation, designed to mimic the planet's extreme conditions, shimmered in front of him, projecting towering columns of flame and sprawling rivers of molten rock. The heat shimmered in the air, almost tangible, yet Jack's expression was one of pure indifference. His classmates stood around him, eyes wide with a mixture of skepticism and disbelief. Some were visibly uncomfortable, a few actively sweating as the heat of the simulation surrounded them. Even Dr. Verloc was watching with an expression that teetered between intrigue and dread. Once again, Verloc's voice echoed in the room, "This is a theoretical survival exercise. Gliese 72D is fundamentally uninhabitable. No species can exist there for longer than a few moments without dying, let alone a human." Jack didn't flinch. He adjusted the heat settings on his suit, the specialized carbon fiber exoskeleton now fully equipped with a range of defensive systems that allowed for extreme heat exposure. It was the same gear used by human engineers in active volcano zones back on Earth, designed for both short-term exposure and protection against intense temperatures. He turned to Verloc. "You keep saying no species. What if I'm wrong?" Verloc stared at him, and Jack could see the flicker of doubt in the professor's alien eyes. He had always been calm, analytical, rarely shaken. But something in the human's confidence seemed to make Verloc uneasy. The rest of the students were still murmuring in disbelief when Jack, without waiting for further permission, walked to the center of the holographic simulation, stood tall, and then, without hesitation, stepped forward into the virtual lava. For a moment, no one moved. The simulation responded immediately. A violent hiss of gas erupted as Jack stepped into the scorching landscape, sending heat waves rippling through the air. The temperature on his suit's internal sensors spiked. External sensors flashed red as he crossed into the simulation's outermost hot zone. Then, something extraordinary happened. As Jack walked, his suit, designed to handle extreme temperatures, absorbed the intense heat, but even without the suit's protective features, his body seemed unfazed. His movements were smooth, confident, as though he were walking through a pleasant summer day rather than an inferno. The other students had frozen in place, some clutching their holodisplays, unable to process what they were seeing. "Impossible," Mira whispered under her breath. Verloc, still standing at the edge of the simulation, had his eyes fixed on Jack's steady gait. "His vitals," he muttered to himself, scanning Jack's readings, "they're stable. This can't be happening." Jack continued walking, each step a mockery of the natural laws the professor had taught them for years. Sweat began to form on the faces of the students, but Jack remained cool and casual. "Hey, Dr. Verloc, Jack called out over his shoulder. How long do you want me to last? I can probably go for an hour, but I'm good for longer if you need more data. Verloc's voice cracked as he struggled to process the information. What are you doing? Jack's response was simple. I'm just walking. The temperature continued to climb, and the simulation began to simulate the increasingly volatile conditions of the lava planet. Yet, despite the heat, despite the pressure, Jack seemed utterly unperturbed. The suit's sensors couldn't even register a level of discomfort beyond what would be expected during a standard high-heat field test. The class was speechless. One of the Ralquan students, a tall, gangly figure, stepped forward, his 6 eyes wide. Is this some kind of trick? Jack stopped mid-step and turned to face them. No trick. Just basic human biology. The words hung in the air as Verloc, eyes narrowed, analyzed the data streaming from Jack's vital monitors. A low, involuntary hum escaped from his throat as the numbers, still stable, defied logic. Jack walked a few more paces, then turned back to Verloc. You know, if we had the right materials, we could probably build a proper base here. Maybe start a mining operation. Verloc's mandibles clicked sharply, his mind racing to process the inconceivable. For a moment, it was as if time had stopped. The classroom, the simulation, even the heat itself, everything seemed to blur. Jack Carter, a human, was walking through a molten wasteland like it was a regular stroll in the park. And there was nothing anyone could do to explain it. As Jack took another step, the temperature sensors on his suit flashed an alert. Critical heat levels reached in 3, 2, 1. But even then, Jack didn't flinch. He simply grinned, his voice calm as ever. This is nothing. Jack Carter was still walking. The heat from the simulation had reached unbearable levels for anyone else, but Jack moved as though the temperature change was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. He took slow, deliberate steps across the lava landscape of Gliese 72D, the fire and molten rock flowing beneath his feet, yet he showed no signs of distress. If anything, he seemed more at ease the longer he stood in the inferno. The simulation wasn't supposed to work this way. It wasn't supposed to let him survive, let alone thrive. But Jack wasn't just surviving. He was strolling across a death world as though it were a paved sidewalk on Earth. Inside the observation chamber, Dr. Verloc stood motionless, watching the readings on his display with increasing disbelief. The data on his hollow screen flashed rapidly, unable to keep up with Jack's unrelenting march. Impossible. Verloc muttered under his breath. The temperature inside the simulation had peaked at 1,500 degrees Celsius. No species, not even those adapted to extreme environments, could endure such heat for long. The data from earlier had predicted Jack's suit would fail within moments. But Jack had kept walking, his body temperature perfectly stable. Why isn't he reacting? Mira Quavries's voice trembled as she observed the data from her station. She had seen simulations of extreme environments before, but this was beyond reason. A handful of other students had already left the observation area, unable to watch further. It was one thing to see a theory debunked. It was another entirely to witness a living being defy the fundamental laws of biology and physics. Verloc, however, stood frozen, watching Jack through the translucent barrier of the chamber. For the first time in his long career, he had no words. His alien intellect, trained to analyze, categorize, and dissect the most hostile environments in the galaxy, could not explain what he was seeing. Okay, I'll admit it, Jack's voice crackled over the communication line, breaking Verloc's trance. I'm pretty sure I'm a walking disaster for your curriculum. Verloc blinked and reactivated his comm system. What, are you? His tone, usually firm and confident, now carried a trace of genuine awe. How is this possible? No living creature should be able to walk across this world, let alone survive in these conditions. Jack slowed his pace, the shimmer of heat rising from the ground beneath him. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, a small gesture that seemed absurd in a place where sweat was supposed to be instantaneously evaporated. It's simple, Doc, Jack said casually. You've seen Earth's volcanoes, right? Mount St. Helens, Icelandic hot springs? Humans have been dealing with fire and molten rock for millennia. We didn't evolve in lava, but we've gotten pretty good at working near it. Verloc's eyes narrowed as he processed the implications of Jack's statement. You survive in such environments, willingly? Survive? Jack chuckled. We've got some of the toughest fire-resistant materials on the planet. Ever heard of a forge? We've got people working in foundries where the temperature's almost as high as this, and they're barely breaking a sweat. Verloc took a step back from the observation window, still struggling to comprehend what Jack had just said. He replayed the information, human history, industrial processes, and survival mechanisms. Fireproof suits, tougher than metal materials, and the astounding fact that humans were capable of working under extreme heat conditions, not just for survival, but as part of their everyday lives. Are you telling me, Verloc started, that you humans are used to such environments? Jack turned and grinned. Not exactly. I mean, this kind of heat is a bit much, but the principle's the same. Humans have an absurd level of adaptability. You can put us in freezing cold, scorching heat, or even underwater, and we'll figure it out. We're resourceful. Resourceful, Verloc repeated the word like a mantra. The alien professor turned away from the observation window and tapped a few commands into his console. Hollow screens displayed images of Earth's industrial zones, mining operations, and volcanic activity. Jack's words began to match the data. Humans had spent centuries learning how to manipulate extreme heat, and not just in controlled laboratory environments. They lived with it. The Erythian student, Mira, stood in awe. You're telling me they have buildings designed for this kind of heat? Jack nodded. And people, too. Blacksmiths, engineers, you name it. We even work near molten metal and lava. It's just a part of life. Dr. Verloc's mind raced. He quickly began to calculate. Humans had evolved to live in some of the most hostile conditions imaginable, conditions that were supposed to be deadly for any sentient species. The heat, the radiation, the pressure, nothing seemed to faze them. Then it hit him, what if this was just the beginning? What if Jack's biological resilience was merely a symptom of something much larger, an adaptability that no other species had ever demonstrated? Do you understand what this means? Verloc said, finally turning back to face Jack, his voice laden with a sense of dawning realization. You're not just surviving these conditions, you're thriving. Jack shrugged. It's what humans do best. We adapt, or we die. I just happen to be good at the first one. Verloc stood frozen, processing the consequences of what he had just learned. The implications were staggering. Earth, the death world, wasn't just some anomaly in the galaxy. No, it was a model for survival, for resilience in the face of impossible odds. And Jack Carter, the unassuming human, was the living proof. What else are humans capable of? Verloc whispered, almost to himself. As Jack Carter continued to stroll through the simulation of Gliese 72D, it became increasingly clear that this wasn't just an academic exercise anymore. This was an existential revelation. The rest of the class had fallen silent, their hollow screens and data feeds running in circles as they tried to process what they were seeing. Dr. Verloc, usually the epitome of collected intellect, had retreated into the corner of the observation room, his multifaceted eyes locked on the unyielding data. He had seen many things in his time, supernovae, black holes, the collapse of civilizations, but Jack was rewriting everything he thought he knew about survival. Your planet, Verloc began slowly, his voice shaky, is, how did you say it? A death world. Jack paused in his steps, glancing over his shoulder. Yeah, you got it. He took another slow stride through the lava, completely at ease, his body completely acclimated to the sweltering heat. The metallic sheen of his suit glinted under the intense light of the simulation, but even without it, his confidence was undeniable. He was like a predator, completely comfortable in an environment that should have boiled any other life form alive within moments. The word death world had never meant more to Dr. Verloc than it did in that moment. The concept of a death world was theoretical, a world so brutal that no species could survive on it. To the professor, such a world was a mathematical impossibility. But now, looking at Jack, he realized something fundamental about humanity had just been exposed. Earth was more than just a harsh environment. It was a paradigm shift for everything they thought they understood about evolution. Mira Klavri was the first to break the silence, her voice uncertain but laden with curiosity. "Jack, how is this even possible?" Jack looked back, grinning. "You'd be surprised what humans can do when they really have to." He shrugged. "You know, we didn't exactly evolve to work in lava, but we've figured it out over time." "Figured it out?" Mira shot back. "How could anyone figure out how to survive something like this? This world has extreme temperatures, pressure, toxic air, lethal gravity. No living thing could possibly make it here." Jack's expression softened, but there was a glint of confidence in his eyes. "That's the thing. We don't just survive. We adapt. We've got technology, but even more than that, we've got biology." Verloc shifted, stepping forward now with a new intensity in his voice. "Biology," he repeated. "But how? Most species evolve to match their environment. Yours seems to do the opposite." Jack grinned. Human evolution wasn't about surviving one environment. It was about surviving any environment. The professor's mind raced. He had always assumed that each species was bound by its environment, shaped by millions of years of evolution to survive only in conditions that matched their physiology. Humans, however, seemed to defy all of these principles. The resilience Jack was demonstrating wasn't just a biological curiosity, it was the key to a new paradigm in survival. What if the human race, rather than simply adapting to the environment, could manipulate their surroundings to suit them? What if they were more adaptable than any species in the galaxy? "Tell me more," Verloc demanded, stepping closer to Jack. His tone was no longer one of skepticism, but of genuine fascination. "How do you adapt to environments like this? Do you have special abilities?" Jack chuckled, taking a few more steps through the simulation, the heat still not affecting him. "No special abilities. Just adaptability. We've been working in extreme heat for centuries, blacksmiths, engineers, miners, factory workers. A lot of industries are built around high heat environments. When you're surrounded by molten metal or near a volcano, you learn real fast how to deal with it." He looked around at the class, now watching him intently. "We didn't develop superpowers, but we developed ways to work with the heat, to withstand it. Heat-resistant suits, technology, and," Jack paused with a smirk, "a lot of grit." The word grit hung in the air as a reminder of just how much humanity had learned to endure. Verloc took a deep breath, the implications of Jack's words settling in. "You mean, this isn't just about surviving here? You've been thriving in places like this, and it's not just in simulations. Humans have built civilizations in conditions that should have wiped out any other species." "Exactly," Jack replied, his voice calm but filled with a quiet pride. "We thrive where others would perish. It's not just about surviving the elements, it's about outlasting them." The alien professor's antennae twitched in thought. "I see now. Your resilience is not simply a result of your biology. It is a direct consequence of your civilization's ability to adapt." He turned to the rest of the class, his voice reverberating with awe. "Humans aren't just enduring their environment. They are rewriting what is possible in any environment. What was once thought to be an insurmountable obstacle is just another opportunity for them." Jack grinned. "That's right. We don't just adapt. We change the rules." Verloc's mind raced as he reviewed the data. The implications were staggering. He had thought of humans as just another species, just another group to study, catalog, and understand. But now, staring at Jack, he realized that humanity had rewritten the playbook. There was something fundamentally different about humans. Something that no other species could claim. The professor's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is only the beginning, isn't it?" Jack paused, looking over his shoulder as he took another slow step into the molten river. "You've got no idea." The galaxy had always viewed Earth as just another garden world in a sea of habitable planets. A temperate zone, bustling with life, but ultimately no different from dozens of other systems. That was until the reality of human resilience set in. Now, Earth was viewed through an entirely different lens, one that trembled with fear and awe. Jack had been back in his dorm room for less than a few hours before the academic board called for a galactic summit. Word had spread fast. His survival on Gliese 72D wasn't just a scientific anomaly, it had shattered every established theory about how life could persist in extreme conditions. But the summit wasn't just about Jack. It was about humanity. The Deathworlders. In the conference hall, dozens of alien representatives, each representing a different species with their own highly evolved abilities, sat in stunned silence as Verloc took the stage. His once calm demeanor had been replaced with a palpable sense of urgency. "I've called this meeting," Verloc began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "not to discuss one student's unusual survival in a lava field, but to reconsider our entire framework of interspecies studies. Humanity has shown us something that cannot be ignored." The council murmured, and Verloc continued. "Earth is not simply a habitable planet. It is a death world, an environment so hostile that no species in the galaxy could survive its extremes. Yet the humans thrive there. This is not a theoretical concept. This is a reality." One of the most prominent leaders, a Xylorian delegate with sleek, reflective skin, raised an antennae. "You're saying that a species from such an inhospitable world has adapted to live in the most extreme conditions we've ever recorded?" Verloc nodded gravely. "Not just survive, adapt, and thrive." He turned toward the holographic display, which showed images of Earth's violent weather patterns, volcanic eruptions, and its dense, turbulent oceans. Their entire evolutionary history is a story of overcoming challenges, whether it's intense cold, extreme heat, toxic environments, or crushing pressure. Humans don't just adapt. They dominate their world. The reactions from the council were immediate and varied. The Vorluxian delegate, a species native to high-gravity worlds, spoke first. "This is absurd. No species should be capable of such a feat surely. The human race is an outlier, a fluke in the great chain of survival." Verloc's gaze turned hard. "I would have believed that too, until I saw one of them walk across the surface of Gliese 72D. The data is irrefutable. The humans are something we can't categorize using our old methods." Another delegate, a large Mari with thick, silicate-like skin, snorted. "We're supposed to be afraid of this? They're a primitive species from an insignificant world. They can survive heat. Big deal. They're still fragile flesh bags." Verloc leaned forward. "Let me remind you of something, Mari. You are a species adapted to extreme cold, your metabolism slow to preserve energy in frozen wastelands. But when a human crosses your home planet's surface during the coldest time of year, they'll be fine, without the need to conserve energy. Without any biological protection. What do you think will happen when humans decide to colonize your world?" The council fell silent. The implication was not lost on anyone. Humanity had been downplaying their potential for far too long. Their environment had made them resourceful, but their adaptability, that was their true strength. Verloc continued, pacing slowly in front of the council. "Humans are not an ordinary species. They may have developed in a so-called death world, but that world has made them extraordinarily capable. And that is something we have to consider in the context of galactic politics, military strategy, and future colonization." Back in the academic halls of the Galactic Academy, Jack was enjoying a rare moment of quiet. His phone pinged with another message, this time from Mira Clavry. "They're talking about you. And about Earth. A lot." He chuckled and tapped out a quick reply. "What's the big deal? I thought we were just proving a point." Myra's response came back almost immediately, "It's more than just a point. You're changing the entire way they think about humanity. You've made the galaxy see us for what we really are, the Deathworlders." Jack leaned back in his chair, his mind replaying everything that had happened since the simulation. He hadn't expected to make waves, not like this. He had just wanted to prove a point to a professor who thought humans were ordinary. Now, the entire galaxy was rethinking everything. What had started as a simple exercise had morphed into something far more significant. Jack Carter wasn't just some student anymore. He was a symbol of Earth's true nature. And humanity had just been reclassified from normal to exceptional. As the summit continued to deliberate, Verloc's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden message on his console, a private transmission marked urgent. He activated the signal, and a new image flickered to life. It was from an intelligence officer on Earth. "Dr. Verloc," the officer's voice crackled, "we've intercepted a communication from a high-ranking military official on one of the human colony worlds. It seems they've just launched a fleet, and it's heading toward an unclaimed system." Verloc's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean by unclaimed?" The officer's voice was grim. "Sir, it's the galactic border zone. It's neutral ground. And the humans are preparing to colonize it." Verloc turned pale. The Deathworlders were on the move. The galaxy was watching Earth. Humanity had unknowingly stepped into the spotlight, but what came next would decide whether they were viewed as the galaxy's greatest threat or its most unexpected ally. The Council on the Galactic Senate had dissolved into an uproar. The news of humanity's unrelenting survival in extreme conditions had sparked a wave of questions, fears, and curiosity that reverberated across the galaxy. But the summit's true implications were just beginning to unfold. The intercepted message from Earth had sent shockwaves through Verloc and the rest of the council members. The humans were moving, preparing to stake their claim on a neutral zone at the edge of galactic space, a region long ignored by most other civilizations. The border zone was untouched, a wild frontier where resources were abundant but competition was minimal. It was a place where new races could grow, or, as Verloc now feared, a place where Earth could expand its reach unchecked. Back on Earth, the mood was different. While the galaxy wrangled with theories and speculation, Jack Carter was busy celebrating. He had no idea that his casual stroll across the simulation had done more than just prove a point. It had sent a ripple through galactic politics. Mira Klaveri, still reeling from the summit's aftermath, had finally reached Jack. "You have no idea what's happening, do you?" she asked, her tone tinged with frustration. Jack looked up from his desk, where he'd been scrolling through a list of new training manuals on survival tactics in extreme environments. "What's up? Still processing the whole Deathworld thing?" Mira didn't laugh. "It's worse than that. You've caused a political crisis. You think this is about survival? This is about expansion, about Earth making a play for a system nobody else wanted. A system nobody else thought could support life." Jack furrowed his brow. "Expansion? It's just a desert zone with some mineral deposits. Who cares?" Mira leaned forward, her voice lower now. "It's not just the resources, Jack. It's about the fact that the galaxy is watching us. And that scares them." Dr. Verloc had spent hours poring over data from the summit, analyzing the events and carefully considering the political ramifications of humanity's unexpected resilience. When the news broke about the humans' fleet, Verloc knew that something had fundamentally changed. The issue wasn't just one species' biological marvel, it was the reality that humans could now colonize planets that were otherwise deemed uninhabitable to every other species in the galaxy. The truth was undeniable. Earth was a threat, not because of technology or military power, but because humanity could adapt to environments no one else could even survive in. The interstellar fleet that humanity had launched was only a few days away from entering the border zone. There were no official claims or diplomatic agreements, just the quiet, confident movement of human ships toward a territory previously left to the fringes of exploration. Verloc was summoned to a private meeting with the Council of Galactic Defense, where military strategists from multiple species had gathered to discuss the potential repercussions. "We cannot allow this to happen," the Mari delegate growled, slamming a fist onto the table. "These humans, they are not just another race. They will overrun everything we've built if left unchecked. Their biology, this adaptability, they'll turn the border zone into their new frontier." Verloc nodded gravely. "I agree. The human's ability to thrive in extreme environments is unlike anything we've seen before. If they can colonize a region that no one else can survive in, they'll be uncontested. It's a foothold we cannot afford them. The Xylorian leader, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. And what do you propose we do about it, Verloc? These are humans we're talking about. A single human survived Gliese 72D. What can we do against them? Verloc's antennae twitched in thought. We need to consider the long-term implications. Humans are not just resilient, they are innovative. They'll find a way to adapt and conquer. It's in their nature. Meanwhile, on Earth's side, Jack found himself at the center of a debate he had never imagined. He had no idea what his casual actions on Gliese 72D had unleashed. He was just a student, caught up in a test that had turned into something much bigger than he could have ever predicted. He was becoming the face of humanity's future, and he didn't even know how to respond. The military, sensing an opportunity, contacted him. The human fleet was preparing to cross into the border zone, and they wanted Jack to serve as an advisor on the expedition. The idea of being a military asset was absurd to him, but there was no turning back now. The stakes were higher than he could have ever anticipated. In the final moments before the fleet's departure, as Jack stood on the platform overlooking the ships, the reality of what was about to unfold hit him. The humans were about to make their mark on a galaxy that had underestimated them for centuries. He wasn't just a survivor of a volcanic world anymore. He was humanity's first ambassador to the stars, and no one knew what that meant. As the fleet's engines ignited and the ships slowly lifted from Earth's surface, Jack's comm buzzed with a single message. The galaxy is watching. Prepare for what comes next. The ships broke through the atmosphere